More and more Americans apparently believe that violence may be necessary to achieve their political goals, and you will never guess which Americans are most likely to think that. Except that you totally will. Let's take a look at the poll results. Overall, 20% of national adults either strongly agree or agree with the idea that Americans may have to resort to violence to get the country back on track. But obviously there are fairly large differences once you break it down by party ID, with Democrats having only 12% agreement, Republicans all the way up at 28%, and independents, as always, somewhere in the middle. And look, we're gonna keep that up for a little bit. Even 12% of Democrats, I think, is a little bit distressing. I think we should all be able to agree on that. But that overall, if you're standing in a crowd, 1 in 5 of the people there think, you know, democracy's complicated and persuading people is tough, so maybe at some point we'll just start shooting people. And the fact that more than 1 in 4 Republicans, a significant percentage, I mean, that looks like the MAGA percentage of the country at large, think, yeah, we might need to do this thing. And when everybody says it, it doesn't necessarily mean the same exact thing. So for those Republicans responding to that, bear in mind, they're already coming off of a big election loss in 2020. They're enraged by the fact that, although they pretend to not accept that Trump lost, they know that he lost because he was incompetent, he wasn't able to rally people to his cause, and they're deeply worried that they will lose again in 2024. We already see the turn in independent right-wing media, demonizing the very idea of democracy or popular democracy. They are working to increase that number, to prepare their population to accept some alternative to democracy. A strongman ruler, an overturned election, or perhaps some sort of violent uprising. And so can we really be that surprised that these numbers are as high as they are, particularly when leaders are going around the country talking about how there's gonna be bloodbaths if Trump loses, and they're talking about the blood of the nation, and they're talking about an invasion at the southern border. This violent, bloodthirsty, militaristic language has become utterly normalized, both by our politicians and by our media. Maybe in the end, we should be shocked that it's only 28% of Republicans and 1 in 5 Americans at large.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you. Yeah, John, it's interesting because the numbers have actually gone down a little bit since earlier polling. So I've seen polling as high as 41% of Republicans saying that it might be time for violence. But I think that I see the numbers going down. This is just a theory, okay? That since Trump took the lead, right-wing leaders have been saying it less about the need for violence. And I think it's because of some of the demographic information they're seeing. I might be way over extrapolating here, okay? But I think that part of the reason why the right-wing leadership, both in media and politics, started talking about violence. You saw congressperson after congressperson talking about your Second Amendment rights, your rights to rise up against government tyranny. 1776, Roseanne Barr is still saying 1776 at this late juncture, et cetera. And she's not unclear about it. She says, if we win, great. If we lose the election, 1776. So don't tell me it means anything else. No, it means we do violence against people we don't agree with, because who cares? We never believed in America. We just believed in power. And as long as we're in power, awesome. If we're not in power, we do violence. But I think that part of the reason that they were going in that direction was because they thought demographically we're screwed. There's no way we can win in the future. I mean, remember, they almost never win the popular vote anymore. The last Republican, in fact, the only, 1 out of the last 7 presidential elections, George W. Bush won the popular vote in 2004. Outside of that, they have lost 6 out of 7. And it looked like it was over for them. So that's why they were going to, well, if we can't win in a democracy, who cares about democracy? The point is us winning. So then we'll do it with violence, as right wing has throughout history, to be honest, right? So, but now they're seeing new numbers with Trump starting to get too close to 20 points with African-American voters, at least African-American males, which is unprecedented. Trump winning Latinos in some polls, unprecedented. And now last poll has Trump with a slight lead among younger voters. And that was the #1 thing they were worried about and why they were talking about violence nonstop. But Biden, congratulations. mainly because of Gaza, but because of many other things, including the nonstop corruption that no Democrat ever does anything about. Well, what do we have? We have young people going, screw the Democrats. So now, all of a sudden, there's a little bit less talk about violence because they don't need it as much, right? That memo has not gone to Donald Trump. Still talking about bloodbaths from time to time. Although, to be fair, that was economic context, et cetera. And it has not gotten to the lunatics like Roseanne Barr that are still on that same path. Okay, now having said that, 28% of Republicans saying we should do violence is awful, terrible. And John's right, 12% of Democrats, what are you thinking? What are you, nuts? No, not under any circumstance. But we're in dark times where people think, and I'll say one last thing about that, then I'm curious what you think, Mondale. Look, guys, I think part of the frustration here is something that people don't talk about. I told you what I think is largely driving the right wing, but the reason you're seeing 12% among Democrats and 18% among independents is not because they're like, oh yeah, man, I hope Trump wins through violence. No, right? A giant percentage of this country is frustrated that our politicians never represent us. And they're like, this system is so broken that they're desperate for any other way to get out of the mess that we're in. That's why in this same poll here, I think we have it. 41%, let me go to graphic 3. 41% of Americans overall said the nation has gotten so far off track that it needs a leader willing to break rules. Looking across partisan lines, 56% of Republicans, 28% of Democrats, and 37% of independents agree. Because what are the rules? If by the rules you mean democracy and the Constitution, hell no, right? But if by the rules you mean this current corrupt system where only the donors win, I begin to understand why people want to break rules. Doing it through violence is a pathway to disaster. That's not the right way to do it. But we do have to break this corrupt system, and that is true.
Yeah, I think for me, I think what bothers me about this is I expect more from PBS. This is a very irresponsible poll in that, like, I think the lack of detail of explaining or explanations of what we're talking about is completely dangerous. So I mean, we see 28%. Also, we're talking about 300 people, right? Out of hundreds of million people that are registered to vote in this country. Also, most independents aren't really independent. Most independents vote always Democrat, always Republican. And I think I would have been more appreciative of PBS if they would have asked people how they vote, not how they're registered, right? Because that matters the most, because we see something. I don't believe that Cenk, I don't believe that there's a lessening of violence. I seen, there's a book that just came out talking about white rural rage, where we're seeing this crazy percentage of rural white people that support Trump that are really anti-Constitution and more strongman and more for violence. And I think we are preparing ourselves to not answer the call when we're not talking about this in a wholehearted way. And I believe wholeheartedly, as a person from rural spaces, a person who is interacting with my rural white neighbors on a daily basis, that war has always been baked in as an option of them losing twice. This is a country where white supremacy is 400 years and undefeated. So when you see it happening twice to a people, you have to understand that MAGA was always about taking America back when she spoke only for white people, because there was no time when America was ever greater than it is now when we're talking about in terms of including the most people. So when we look at America right now, talking about going back to this time when it was great, you have to ask when. When you're asked when, everybody that you ask on the Republican side, they're talking about a time where only white people, specifically rich white people, had rights. And I think that to me is scary as hell. It also reminds me that America is as white as she is because of policies, right? America did not remain majority white without preventing African nations from migrating to this country throughout the 60s, 70s, 50s, and 40s, right? It wasn't until the 90s that black people from African countries could actually start coming here. The same thing is true with America limiting how many brown people could come here. So America is the way she is because of racist policies. And I think MAGA and this idea of violence is baked in and is as American as apple pie and baseball. Yeah. One more thing, if you don't mind. Black men aren't becoming more conservative, right? We just watched in Ohio, and I keep telling people, if you look at black men, what we're seeing is a rejection of the democratic way of policy. It's very transactional. So what we see is more black men willing to sit out elections, not more black men vote for Republican candidates. We see time and time again, when progressive ideas are on the ballot, nobody outperforms black men, not even black women. And the world might look at me like I got 3 heads, but I also have the data to support it. In Ohio, we just watched women's right to choose be on the ballot, and black men outperform everybody. The closest demographic to us was black women, where 80% of them voted for it and 88% of black men. We actually voted for women's right to choose in Ohio more than we did for the legalization of marijuana. We also saw this time and time again throughout the South when we were sitting in our focus groups talking to black men. This idea that black men are becoming more conservative is something that is a creation of Donald Trump saying it one time in 2020, and then Edmonds running with it through these flawed polls. People don't understand the history of black men in this country is to lie to pollsters, because we were raised 2 and 3 generations ago from people who were polled by slave masters who said, are you gonna run away from this plantation, or are you happy? And to tell the truth to that white person polling you was to get yourself killed. Nobody was happy on the plantation, but you wouldn't tell the master that. So we were raised by those folk. My grandmother is a great example of this. A woman who went to church all the time, but the minute somebody white called her phone and asked about her insurance or her life policy, she would tell a lie immediately and hang up the phone after she said, bless your heart. But that was, I mean, this is a woman that was raised by someone who was enslaved. So, you know, lying to pollsters is not a lie for black people. It's a way to save your life and protect your identity.
All right, I'm gonna add the last couple of quick things here. Yeah, I've seen some shift in the rhetoric from the right-wing leaders, as I said, but you're right that when you get down to the level of hardcore MAGA, the guys that go to the Trump rallies, we recently went to a rally, asked 10 guys if they would prefer Biden as president or Trump as dictator. All 10 said Trump is dictator. Wow. Right? And so they're not, and look at the South, right? So in the old days, what did the South do? Do you think they did democracy? No, they did might is right. I'm going to own you even though you're a human being. How am I gonna do that? Am I gonna let you vote? No. Am I gonna let you get educated? No. I'm just gonna use violence against you. So let's not pretend that this is a new concept in America, right? And finally, as part of that, when we did the Civil War, they said, oh no, it wasn't about slavery. And a lot of people in the South believe that. That's insanity. It was obviously about slavery. And that is why when you, in the same exact poll, when they asked how many of you think that Joe Biden actually won the presidency, only 38% of Republicans at this late date said that he's actually the legitimate president. So huge majority of Republicans just don't believe in facts.
Wow.
And they think, no, Trump's actually the president, and that Biden never won. So that's nuts. That's totally, utterly nuts. And why? Because the right wing is used to getting lied to. Because guys, super last thing, what is the whole point of the Republican Party? Tax cuts for the rich, okay? That is the only thing they ever do. That's the only thing that Trump did, right? That's the only thing Reagan did. That's the only thing Bush did. Also wars, okay? But overall, money flowing to the top. That is the whole point of the Republican Party. In order to get a majority of people to vote for more money going to the richest people in America, what do you have to do to them?
Lie.
Yeah, gotta lie, exactly. That's why the Republican Party is built on a mountain of lies.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.